Welcome to Crime Ciphers, where we uncover the most shocking true crime stories that shake you to the core. Today, we dive deep into Houston's oil empire, exposing corporate greed, environmental betrayal, and one whistleblower's dangerous fight for justice. This gripping tale reveals how power corrupts and survival demands impossible choices. You won't believe the twists ahead. If you crave more bone-chilling stories and eye-opening revelations, smash that like button, subscribe to Crime Ciphers, and hit the notification bell. Your front row seat to true crime's darkest secrets awaits. Let's move to our first story. And this one begins with a nurse who noticed patients arriving with mysterious symptoms that didn't match any known overdose. Chicago is known for its vibrant culture, famous deep dish pizza, and rich history. But beneath the skyscrapers and jazz music is a darker side. Criminal networks exploiting modern technology and new vulnerabilities. Our story begins on a crisp October night in 2024, when a local healthcare worker named Maya noticed alarming patterns while working in the city's emergency room. Maya, a 29-year-old nurse with a sharp mind and compassionate heart, started noticing an unusually high influx of victims presenting symptoms of drug overdoses, but with a twist. There was no common substance found in toxicology reports. Despite appearing unconscious, some patients later revealed vague memories of being in unfamiliar apartments or cars. Maya's concern grew as she and her colleagues noticed discrepancies between the clinical symptoms and laboratory findings. In some cases, patients were coherent enough to recount fragmented memories that hinted at forced drugging in social settings. Alarmed by these findings, Maya approached Sam, the hospital's head of emergency medicine. Sam himself had years of experience and was quick to realize that this was not a typical overdose pattern. He assigned a team, including Maya, to collect detailed patient histories and collaborate with police and forensic experts to investigate further. Over several weeks, investigations uncovered that a man named Caleb, 32, was using technological sophistication and social media manipulation to lure victims, primarily targeting socially active young adults and vulnerable community members. Caleb was no common criminal. A software engineer with a prestigious background, he had managed to maintain a facade of normalcy. Several minor drug offenses from his past didn't indicate the potential for the scale of crimes he was about to commit. His method was chillingly effective. Caleb created multiple fake profiles on popular dating apps, especially those catering to young professionals and the LGBTQ+ community. Through elaborate messaging and gradual grooming, he gained the trust of his victims. Once the victims felt secure, he would invite them to private locations, apartments or hotel rooms, where he spiked their drinks with a new generation synthetic sedative, a substance that neither hospital protocol nor standard toxicology tests could initially detect. This sedative induced deep and prolonged unconsciousness while masking normal overdose indicators, allowing Caleb to rob, abduct, or in worse cases, sexually assault his victims without immediate detection. One of the survivors, Mark, a 24-year-old graphic designer from Logan Square, described waking up confused in an unfamiliar apartment, missing his wallet, phone, and personal documents. His initial disbelief turned to fear once he connected with friends who had similar incidents. Mark reported the incidents to the Chicago police, triggering a cybercrime and narcotic investigation task force's involvement. Authorities cross-referenced dating app usage logs, hospital records, and surveillance footage from restaurants and clubs. Gradually, they narrowed down Caleb's activities and identified his residence in a quiet suburban area near Oak Park. A high-risk raid in February 2025 uncovered arrest-worthy evidence. Hidden rooms filled with drug-making materials, recording devices, and computers contained logs of victims, digital communications, and the synthetic substance itself. Caleb's arrest sparked widespread media attention, highlighting the dangers of modern crime leveraging technology and synthetic drugs. His trial was watched closely by both legal experts and the public. Throughout the trial, prosecutors presented damning digital evidence, victim testimonies, and forensic toxicology reports showcasing Caleb's calculated and predatory behavior. Caleb's defense team attempted to argue consent in all cases, claiming that interactions were voluntary and fabricated accusations fueled by misunderstandings or ulterior motives. However, the multifaceted evidence, including drug residue analysis from victims and data extracted from Caleb's devices, dismantled these defenses. Victims faced the courtroom bravely, sharing their emotional and physical trauma, urging the community to recognize the evolving nature of predatory crimes. The presiding judge underscored the significance of technology in both committing and solving crimes, calling for stronger digital safeguards and community education to prevent future tragedies. In March 2025, Caleb was sentenced to 35 years in a federal penitentiary, with parole eligibility only after serving 25 years. His sentence reflects the severity and modernity of his crimes, blending traditional criminal actions with emerging threats rooted in technology abuse. This case has become a catalyst for changes in law enforcement training, healthcare protocols, and social media regulations nationwide. Hospitals in Chicago and other major cities are now equipped with updated toxicology screenings for synthetic drugs, and awareness programs about digital safety have been launched in colleges and communities. Social media companies have increased efforts to verify user identities and detect suspicious behavioral patterns by leveraging artificial intelligence and user reporting mechanisms. The story of Caleb is a stark reminder that crime adapts alongside technology, prompting a continuous need for vigilance, education, and proactive measures to protect society. If you or someone you know feels unsafe or has experienced suspicious encounters, reach out to local authorities or community support groups without hesitation. Thank you for joining me on this in-depth investigation of one of America's most disturbing and recent crime stories. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below with crime topics you want us to explore next. Stay safe and vigilant out there. Good night. Let's take a closer look at Maya's role in this case, which underscores the critical importance of frontline healthcare workers in uncovering hidden crimes. Maya's attentiveness and quick reporting enabled law enforcement to act promptly. Her courageous decision to speak out despite fears of backlash empowered others in the medical field to watch more carefully for unusual presentations. Victim stories played a pivotal role in building the case. In addition to Mark, several other survivors came forward anonymously through support groups online. They shared accounts of waking up in shadowy spaces, confused and violated, often struggling with the trauma long after the physical symptoms subsided. These shared experiences helped the police build psychological profiles and understand the extent of Caleb's reach. Police work was multifaceted. Digital forensics teams combed through millions of messages, social media footprints, and phone metadata. Cybercrime experts traced unique IP address patterns, while forensic chemists worked tirelessly to identify the new synthetic sedative that was initially undetectable with traditional tests. Community outreach increased dramatically following exposure of the case. Chicago-based nonprofit groups launched workshops teaching digital safety skills, how to spot fake profiles, recognize grooming behaviors, and maintain personal safety online. Maya also became a public speaker, sharing her experience to raise awareness and train healthcare workers nationwide. Legal experts have highlighted the Caleb trial as a landmark case for integrating cybersecurity evidence in courtroom proceedings. The presentation of complex digital relationships alongside physical forensic examinations set precedent for handling modern crimes in traditional court systems. This trial also exposed gaps in regulation of synthetic drugs and social media monitoring, prompting legislative discussions. Senators and city officials announced plans to increase funding for drug research, cyber policing, and community education. Experts in psychology remarked how criminal behavior is morphing with technology, allowing perpetrators new avenues to exploit victims. They urged continuous adaptation in law enforcement training and technological development. For victims and their families, the sentencing marked a bittersweet closure. Many struggled to rebuild their lives, but found strength in knowing justice was served. This story is a wake-up call that technology, while remarkable, requires careful stewardship and community vigilance to prevent its misuse. Before we end, always remember, if you suspect anything unusual when using social platforms or when someone's behavior feels off, report it. Protect your digital and physical spaces diligently. Thank you once again for joining this deep dive into Chicago's horrifying 2024 crime story. Please comment below if you or someone you know has encountered similar situations or if there's a mystery you'd like us to unpack next. Remember, knowledge is power, and awareness is the first step to safety. Good night, stay safe, and see you in the next video. Remember, the safety of yourself and your loved ones is paramount. Keep your networks informed, report suspicious activity, and always trust your instincts in the digital and physical worlds. By staying vigilant and informed, we can help build safer communities for all. Thank you for trusting us with your time and interest in these crucial stories. Stay aware, stay safe, and see you again in the next video. Let us continue to support each other by sharing knowledge and fostering awareness in our communities. The fight against crime is not only for law enforcement, but for every individual who values safety and justice. Together, we can build a safer future for all. This channel is committed to bringing you true stories that matter, to educate and empower you with the truth behind the headlines. Your support means a lot, so keep engaging and stay informed. Let us continue to support each other by sharing wisdom and security tips. Your voice matters in keeping your city safe. Let's build a community stronger than ever. Share this story with someone who needs to stay vigilant. More true crime stories are coming soon. Stay connected. Story 2. Let's move to our second story. And it opens with a rusted container ship docked silently at the port of Los Angeles, guarded by shadows that never sleep. In the bustling summer of 2024, the port of Los Angeles was not just a gateway for goods and commerce, but also a hotbed for illicit trades that thrived in the dark underbelly of global supply chains. Amid the crisscross of cranes and the ceaseless clatter of cargo, a small-time dealer named Tommy wove his way through the tangled network of drug carts and gang territories. Tommy, only 27, but with the instincts of a veteran, had grown up in the neighborhoods shadowing the docks. The stories of disappeared youths and failed promises were etched into the cracked sidewalks he walked. Yet, despite the pervasive scarcity and violence, Tommy always believed he could dance on the edges of law and survival without falling in. That's where Sarah came in, a community activist who had seen her city slowly swallowed by addiction and greed. Sarah's campaign for safe housing and drug education was a faint light in neighborhoods where the line between seller and buyer blurred, and every child felt the pressure to choose a side. Across the city's skyline, Mike, a DEA agent with a relentless drive, tracked patterns of suspicious shipments with a growing urgency. His office was plastered with maps, intercepted calls, and informant tips, blinking red alerts that spoke volumes of the brewing storm. Tommy's latest deal was whispered about in hushed tones, a shipment from Mexico, hidden inside containers of imported machinery, promising a windfall that would either lift him out of the game or bury him deeper in it. The encrypted messages between Tommy and his supplier went unnoticed by many, but chosen as the target of Mike's operation. One sweltering night, under the canvas of Los Angeles's urban stars, Tommy stood at the edge of the docks, waiting. His heartbeat matched the cadence of distant waves and drone patrols humming overhead. The container arrived late, a hulking steel phantom drifting into the maze of cargo. His associate, Leo, a wiry man known for his cold efficiency, scanned the perimeter with robotic precision. Inside the warehouse, crates were unloaded under flickering fluorescent lights. Hidden compartments revealed kilograms of fentanyl pressed into everyday objects, a new variant of poison the city hadn't fully reckoned with. Tommy felt the weight of what this meant. More lives at risk, more chances for betrayal. Sarah had helped set up a safe hotline for residents to report suspicious activities, often risking the ire of gang leaders and corrupt officials. Her determination made her both a beacon and a target. She had received anonymous warnings that night, whispers of a shipment that would shake the very fabric of her community. Mike's team coordinated a sting, moving in with precise timing. Unmarked vans and black SUVs converged, officers taking positions to intercept the pickup, trucks hauling the crates. The operation was tense. One slip could spark a firefight or tip the traffickers off. The raid unfolded with chaotic bursts of shouted orders and desperate scurrying. Tommy and Leo were caught off guard. The underestimation of law enforcement's reach was their fatal flaw. Bullets shattered the night. Crates scattered amidst the crackle of comms. In the aftermath, the community grappled with mixed feelings. Relief tempered by the knowledge that countless dealers would fill the void left behind. Sarah spoke at a press conference, urging systemic change beyond arrests, addressing poverty, education, and rehabilitation. Mike's investigation peeled back layers of corruption linking port officials and law enforcement, some complicit in turning a blind eye for payoffs. The case became a turning point, changing protocols and inspiring watchdog groups. Tommy's trial was swift but complex, involving testimony from former associates and cutting-edge forensic evidence, including cellular data tracking and chemical analyses that linked recovered drugs conclusively to his shipments. His defense painted him as a product of his environment, a young man trapped by circumstances. Yet the jury convicted him on multiple counts for trafficking, conspiracy, and endangerment. Sentenced to 30 years, Tommy's fate echoed through the neighborhoods, a cautionary tale but also a call to address the roots of the epidemic. Sarah's activism surged, with increased funding for awareness programs and community policing strategies aimed at healing rather than punishing. Mike continued his work, driven by the conviction that dismantling networks required relentless pursuit, but also broad cooperation between agencies and communities. Tommy grew up with the hum of the ships and the sea breeze mingling with the harsh realities of poverty and crime. His father disappeared when he was young, rumored to have drowned in one of the polluted channels, leaving Tommy to navigate the streets alone. By 16, he was selling small amounts of narcotics, learning to read the fine lines between survival and peril. His charisma and quick wit earned him respect and enemies alike in the sprawling network of Los Angeles drug trade. Sarah's fight was personal. Her brother had fallen to an overdose just 2 years prior, a casualty of the very drugs trafficked through the port. Sarah's neighborhood meetings involved sharing stories, providing harm reduction tools, and lobbying local authorities for more resources. She embodied resilience, but bore the scars of the lives shattered by addiction. Mike was a third-generation law enforcement officer. His grandfather chased bootleggers during Prohibition, and his father fought gang violence in the 90s. Mike inherited a relentless pursuit of justice and a belief in community policing. His latest case was the most complex, blending cyber investigations with old-school surveillance, requiring a new breed of criminal justice approach. The encrypted messages between Tommy and his suppliers revealed an intricate web of intermediaries. Communication took place in pockets of secure cyber cafes and encrypted phone calls, where even a slight electrical interference could betray the whole chain. Mike's unit invested in advanced AI tools to decode and predict the traffickers' next moves. Leo, Tommy's right hand, was the archetype of the streetwise enforcer. His history was murky, a mix of juvenile detention and lost opportunities. But beneath his tough exterior, he wrestled with the consequences of his life choices as much as anyone. As the night of the raid unfolded, tension rose to a boiling point. Officers encountered fierce resistance, with gunshots echoing against the cold steel and concrete. The seconds felt endless until the last suspect was cuffed and silence reclaimed the docks. Post-raid, the emotional toll on the community was palpable. Families who had lost members to overdoses watched news coverage with cautious hope. Sarah's outreach programs received a surge in support, but the path to recovery was long and fraught with challenges. The legal proceedings unearthed layers of corruption. Some dock workers and port officials faced indictments for complicity, revealing the systemic nature of the problem. Mike's integrity came under scrutiny, but his dedication and spotless record strengthened the prosecution's case. Throughout the trial, Tommy's demeanor oscillated between remorse and defiance. His words painted a portrait of a man caught in cycles of desperation and opportunity, but ultimately accountable for the lives lost. Sentencing was a somber occasion. The judge's words resonated beyond the courtroom, emphasizing community healing and the necessity of addressing poverty, education, and mental health. Sarah's voice carried far beyond her neighborhood. She championed policy reforms and fostered coalitions between law enforcement, health services, and community leaders. Her fight symbolized the possibility of change born out of tragedy. Mike continued to refine strategies that combine technology with empathy. His experience reaffirmed that combating such entrenched networks required innovative thinking and community trust. Los Angeles stood at a crossroads, its future shaped by choices made in courtrooms, community halls, and city streets. The Los Angeles port streets, now quieter yet vigilant, remained a testament to the ongoing battle, a reminder that crime evolves, but so must justice. This story is a vivid reminder that behind every crime statistic are human lives, fragile and complex. The dance between ambition, crime, and justice continues, but awareness and action light the path forward. For those who walk the edges between shadows and light, this story is a stark illustration of ambition, risk, and the human cost trapped in the complex dance of survival. If you or someone you know faces similar threats, remember, help is near. Reach out, speak up. If you or someone you know is affected by drug trade or addiction, seeking help can be the first step toward breaking free. Join us next time as we delve into another story that uncovers the shadows lurking in our everyday lives. Your support helps bring these stories to light. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and above all, stay hopeful. Thank you for joining today's deep dive into a 2024 crime rattling the heart of Los Angeles. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts on cases you want us to explore. Thank you for joining this detailed exploration of crime in modern America. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts and requests. Until next time, take care of yourselves and your communities. Stay safe, stay informed, and see you in the next story. Story 3. Let's dive into our third story. And it opens with a trader who found an email on his corporate server with a warning that no one else received. In the steel and glass canyon of Manhattan's financial district, where the digital tickers flickered day and night and autumn winds whispered through shadowed alleyways, Marcus moved with the rhythm of a city that never sleeps. It was 2025, and beneath the constant pulse of commerce, a digital storm was gathering, unseen but imminent. Marcus was not just any trader. His fingers danced over keyboards, tracking numbers and encrypted trends, working at the edge of legality. At 34, he had scaled heights in the world of finance. But ambition can breed blindness, and behind his sharp suits lay a mind entangled in secrets. Across Manhattan, Lisa, a federal investigator driven by the pursuit of truth, worked late nights surrounded by walls of code, surveillance feeds, and shifting data. This case had become her obsession, a labyrinth of blockchain transactions, untraceable cryptocurrency wallets, shell companies, digital footprints vanishing in the void. Months of stringing together evidence revealed a conspiracy that threatened not only the city's wealth, but its trust. Meanwhile, Danny, a former cybersecurity consultant, now ostracized whistleblower, pored over server logs and inside emails, convinced there was a scheme even deeper than anyone believed. His efforts had cost him his reputation and job. Yet the drive to expose corruption never stopped. What he found sent ripples through Manhattan's polished world, a network siphoning millions at the click of a button. One gray morning, Marcus received an anonymous email. They know. Untraceable, cryptic, it shifted his reality. Every message, every meeting became suspect. A haze of paranoia clouded his judgment. He watched colleagues laugh in corner offices, oblivious to the lines being crossed in their own ledgers. Lisa's investigation escalated. Subpoenas flew across screens, informants whispered in private chats, and algorithms searched for patterns in oceans of financial data. Her team mapped complex pathways, money leaping across borders, vanishing into the ether. Danny's information filled crucial gaps. Together, they constructed timelines revealing how individual trades snowballed into a scheme, reaching far beyond Wall Street. Marcus started patrolling the city after hours, tracing the glow of neon in puddles, rain hissing against glass as he calculated his next moves. Cocktail parties blurred into tense meetings. Once, money meant freedom. Now, each transaction meant risk. The tension peaked in December. Marcus was summoned to a secret meeting in a penthouse overlooking the city. A room filled not only with traders, but power brokers and legal minds. Every word traded more valuable than currency. The air was electric. Each document exchanged promising profit or peril. Marcus tried to measure the risk, but deception ruled the table. The deal itself more shadow than substance. Simultaneously, Lisa prepared her team. Federal agents and cyber experts coordinated with IRS enforcers. The raid hit at dawn. Sirens shattered the glass calm, servers seized, suspects cuffed. Live feeds streamed back to headquarters, nerves were frayed, stakes impossibly high. Days later, the scale of the fraud became clear. Fortunes routed offshore, lives changed overnight, communities rattled by economic shockwaves. Marcus faced legal battle after legal battle. Defense lawyers wielded complex technical jargon as shields. But email evidence, digital forensics, and insider testimony overwhelmed the courtroom. The city watched, wary. News cycles painted Marcus as both genius and criminal, a man at war with his own ambition. Lisa testified for stricter regulations, demanding more transparency, better protections, and tools to fight digital fraud. Lawmakers listened. Her evidence left no room for denial. Danny, once excluded, appeared on talk shows as a symbol of modern heroism, resilience, technical skill, and moral courage on display. Together, Lisa's team and whistleblowers forced banks and trading houses to examine compliance, close loopholes, and reinvest in integrity. Marcus, in custody, reflected on paths taken, a childhood in Queens, a family built on hopes of the American dream. On Wall Street, he'd learned to hunt opportunity and dance on shifting sand. But the world had changed. Greed now lived in digits, not paper, and temptation traveled electronically. Lisa returned to Brooklyn, her work unfinished but vindicated. Though headlines faded, awareness spread. Investors became more vigilant, institutions bolstered internal controls, the public grew warier of get-rich-quick promises. Danny joined outreach programs, helping train regulators and victims of fraud. His story, one of loss and redemption, resonated in the tech community. Proof that honesty can survive adversity. Manhattan's heartbeat continued, altered but alive. Through glass and concrete, thousands worked and hustled, some seeking fair gain, others driven by shadows. The city, more cautious, held its breath for the next storm. Weeks later, Marcus's sentencing became national news. 25 years, restitution, and his public apology. He admitted guilt, cited ambition, begged forgiveness for investors harmed. The courtroom watched as a symbol of unchecked greed fell. For Lisa, victory was bittersweet. While one network collapsed, countless more threats emerged. She pushed for better detection, coordinated with foreign agencies, and taught seminars on digital security. Danny, too, never stopped. His resilience became legend, overcoming public distrust, building a reputation as a consultant and advisor, fighting against new cyber threats. What began with a single secret email became a saga of ambition unraveled. The financial sector shuddered, watchdogs rallied, law changed. Still, Lisa knew each. Victory was temporary, every truth contested by those who profit from silence. Marcus, alone in his cell, replayed memories. Childhood games, first job as an intern, the rush of success, the first time temptation won. At night, he dreamed of escape. Sometimes into a world where he defied greed, sometimes into oblivion. Lisa visited victims, retirees whose savings vanished overnight, families forced to rebuild. She learned their stories, advocated for restitution, pressed legislators for change. Her name mattered now. A rare guardian in a city where trust must be earned anew each day. Danny taught whistleblower workshops, training analysts to spot red flags and resist intimidation. He became mentor and friend, living proof that truth seekers can change the course of events. By spring, Wall Street's culture was shifting. Coffee meetings replaced clandestine trades, compliance teams grew, and brokers shared information with regulators. Vigilance became routine. Lisa received special commendations, her work lauded in Congress for advancing digital justice. Danny was honored at tech conferences, sharing panels with top software engineers and legal minds. The city healed slowly. Marcus became a cautionary tale, a symbol for new recruits, a lesson in ethics. Still, the threat lingered. Digital deception adapts faster than law, and the future holds further battles. Lisa, Danny, and countless unknown heroes continue their watch. For those listening tonight, every voice matters. Every choice builds a legacy of truth, of vigilance, of justice. As you leave this story, remember that crime hides not just in alleys, but in emails, contracts, and code. Stay aware. Ask questions. Pursue the truth. Thank you for joining us on this extended journey through America's financial underworld. Like, subscribe, and share thoughts below. Your engagement shapes the stories we tell and helps guard against new shadows. Stay alert, stay informed, and until our next story, keep seeking the truths beneath the surface. In this ever-evolving digital world, only vigilance and courage can build real safety. Remember, your awareness can protect your home, your city, your future. Never underestimate your impact. Each story told is a step towards justice, a voice for the voiceless, and a light in the darkest places. In every moment you lend to truth, you become a guardian of hope. Stay strong. Stay safe. In the fight against crime, every voice matters. Your attentiveness, your courage, your refusal to look away can make the difference between silence and justice. As we uncover these stories, we honor those who have suffered and those who seek to right the wrongs. Let us stand together with the vulnerable, lifting collective vigilance as a shield against shadowed misdeeds. Join us in this crusade for truth, fairness, and redemption. Remember to engage with our content, share your thoughts, and keep this flame of awareness alive. Until the next story unfolds, keep safe, stay educated, and know that your presence matters more than you realize. Story 4. Let's turn to our fourth story. And it begins with a veteran who found his father's old debt collectors waiting at his front door. Detroit, summer 2023. The city had learned the art of surviving its own endings. On some blocks, the past sat in the broken teeth of old auto plants, their windows punched out to make way for the wind. Marcus, 35, always walked like the street might grab his ankles. A decade ago, he was a specialist in the military, trained to notice threats. Now, discharged and restless, his skills translated into a different economy. One watched by men who measured trust by what you carried for them and how well you kept secrets. No one in Marcus's circle called it arms trafficking. It was logistics or freight work. Boxes moved from Ohio to Detroit, past Indiana, and broken mile markers, filled with items that teenagers would trade for territory, and men would trade for loyalty. Marcus's job was to ensure the crates full of weapons arrived at the correct empty warehouse, got signed for by a trusted face, and that nothing ever touched a digital record. For each completed run, he received $2,000 cash in an envelope, which he would hide between utility bills in his sister Sarah's kitchen. Sarah was the kind of woman cities leaned on without knowing it. She worked at the hospital as a nurse's aide on the night shift, riding the bus home at sunrise, her shoes scuffed by hope more than poverty. She cooked, paid rent on time, fixed their father's Buick, and shielded Marcus's secrets. They had grown up on Kercheval, a street that once saw parades now thick with foreclosure signs and stray dogs. John, their brother, joined the Detroit police after their father's death. He still believed in boundaries, in the faded gold of his badge. Sometimes he drank coffee outside the same warehouse Marcus used, never suspecting the world his brother navigated at night. The three siblings spoke less each year. Grief can be a wall or a rope. In their case, it became both. On a Monday in July, Marcus was eating cold chicken by the window when they came. Black sedan, motor idling. Two men in shirts too crisp for summer, eyes hard as leftover glass. First, they spoke about his father's loan. Unfinished business, one called it. Tapping an invoice with names crossed out but amounts doubled. Then, they let the silence drive the point home. Marcus's hands stayed very still on the table, his mind ticking through options. He owed more than he had. "We want a favor, not your money," the visitor said. Tomorrow, midnight. Packard plant. After they left, Marcus sat in the kitchen for a long time, letting the city's evening slide over him in a slow, metallic hush. Sarah called from her room, asking if he was coming to dinner. He told her, in a minute. Even as he picked up his phone to text his contact, TT was ex-military too, but a couple degrees rougher, less patient. Marcus wrote, "Trouble. Owe a run. Packard tomorrow." The reply, "We know. Don't screw this up." All next day, anxiety stuck to Marcus's ribs. He watched Sarah laugh at the morning news, her kindness an ache. He met John for coffee, letting his younger brother talk about new recruit troubles while Marcus nodded, envying belief he couldn't muster. That night, as daylight faded, he showered with the lights off. Old habit from nights when light was risk, not comfort. Before he left for Packard, Sarah asked if he wanted her to wait up. "Go to bed," he said. "I won't be late." She touched his shoulder, their mother's habit, and disappeared behind her door. The Packard plant at midnight was a skeleton glowing under streetlight. Marcus approached from the abandoned tracks, boots scraping gravel. Inside, T waited beside a wooden crate, green like old army gear. Inside, 9 handguns, ammo. You drive to Hamtramck, meet a guy named Robbie. Smile, don't talk. T's words clipped as gunfire. "You're good for this, right?" Marcus nodded. He was running out of ways to say no. Driving through Detroit's dark veins, Marcus listened to the city breathe. He passed the spot where he'd crashed his first bike, the church where his parents married. At a red light, he thought about John. The badge, the promise, the line he wished he could have held. At a green light, he remembered Sarah sleeping, used to waiting for men who didn't come back. Robbie waited in the parking lot of a closed laundromat. Hair buzzed, jacket too big, impatience wearing thin. "You got it?" Robbie asked. Marcus opened the trunk, flashing steel in the moonlight. Robbie nodded, pulled out a roll of bills, and pressed them into Marcus's palm. The exchange took less than a minute, but felt like a year. Marcus drove away without turning back. By the next afternoon, Marcus's phone pinged again. T wanted another job. Same setup, extra grand. Marcus wanted to refuse. But the men with the sedan came by that evening, polite as always, asking about his progress. Threats lived soft inside their words, like broken teeth behind a smile. Sarah noticed Marcus's restlessness as she chopped onions. "Everything okay?" she asked. He lied, habit stronger than honesty. She told him John was working overtime, helping with a string of burglaries by the river. "Talk to him sometime," she said. "He misses you." Marcus just nodded. He wanted to say, "I miss both of you." But the words shrank inside his chest. That night, Marcus waited outside the warehouse. Instead of T, 2 strangers arrived. One was jittery, the other stone-faced. Marcus's nerves cracked as he realized that this wasn't routine. "Change of plans," the stone-faced one said. "You ride with us, crate in the trunk." No choice. Marcus stood between threats. His past jobs, his debt, the unknowns in the back seat. They drove out onto I-75, city lights trailing behind. The men spoke in coded. Talk, drops. Clean rides. Marcus watched exits slip past, the city shrinking to memory. His hands sweated on his knees. After 20 minutes, the car stopped under a viaduct. The stone-faced stranger nodded at Marcus. "Get out." "Wait there." Alone under flickering orange lights, Marcus listened. The men transferred the crate into a battered van that crawled away. The sedan peeled off, leaving Marcus with a phone number scribbled on a card. "Call for address, you're cut." He waited, Checked his phone. 2 missed calls from Sarah. He walked 2 miles back to Packard, the city silent except for an ambulance siren slicing night. His mind swung between fear and resignation. He tried calling John, but hung up before the first ring. The heaviness of secrets pressed in. He went home as morning snuck up, Sarah's shoes still by the door. 3 days passed. Marcus ferried crates in silence, not knowing who watched or waited. At night, he sat on the back porch, tracing stars through smog and thinking about Afghanistan. How danger at least made sense there. On the 4th day, trouble snapped its jaws. John visited during lunch, still in uniform, badge glinting. He set down his coffee. "We picked up someone last night. Robbie, headgear traced to you." 3 words froze Marcus. "What's going on?" Marcus searched for denial, but fear thumped in his veins. "It's complicated, John." John's jaw tightened. "You running guns?" Silence hung long between them. Then John slammed his hands on the table, face pale. "Dad would hate this," he said, voice breaking. That night, the men from the sedan came again. "You've got one more run," they said, "or you know what happens to your family." Marcus nodded, a marionette whose strings were debts and regret. He called T. "I'm out," he lied. "Too late," came the reply. In his final job, Marcus was to deliver 2 crates to a house on the far west side. He parked outside in the rain, city lights blurry. Sarah texted, "Come home." John left a voicemail. "I want to talk." Marcus felt every thread unravel, choices eclipsed by necessity. Marcus took the crates to the porch, heart pounding. Police cars screeched to a halt. Red and blue lights cut through the mist. He dropped the crates, raised his hands. Officers swarmed, cuffed his wrists. As he was read his rights, John stepped from a cruiser, eyes hollow, unable to speak. Sarah appeared at the curb, tears shining. In custody, Marcus kept quiet. Detectives pressed for names. He thought about the men from the sedan, whose threats reached into every cell in Detroit. Giving names wouldn't help. He confessed only to what was his: the jobs, the debt, the guilt. In court, his public defender spoke of PTSD, family hardship, Detroit's collapse. The prosecutor showed pictures of the guns, the money, evidence linking Marcus to a dozen unsolved cases. Sarah and John sat together, his badge lost in his coat pocket, her hands clasped in hope. The verdict was guilty. The judge's words blurred through the pounding of Marcus's heart. 10 years, with the possibility of parole if he cooperated. As he was led away, he mouthed to Sarah, "I'm sorry." She nodded, tears refusing to fall. In prison, Marcus worked in the library. He wrote letters to Sarah full of apologies. She wrote back with family news and hope. He never heard from John. His dreams grew quiet, haunted more by absence than fear. The city went on living. Old factories crumbled, new condos rose, good men fell, and better women held families together. Sarah finished nursing school, started a new job. John transferred to another city, his calls to their sister short and rare. Marcus finished 7 years and came home to a city both changed and familiar. He opened a shop fixing small engines, paid off what he could, left the rest to the wind. Sometimes he saw Sarah in the diner, always with a new book. John visited once, brief and awkward. Both men changed by betrayal and survival. On cold nights, Marcus drove past Packard. The old plant was just steel and ghosts now, except in his memory, where it pulsed with danger and choices and family. He understood that survival was just a patchwork of decisions, some of which you never get to unmake. Detroit carried on. Fights and triumphs, debts and redemptions, shadows and dawn. In another life, Marcus might have been just a mechanic, just a brother, just a son. In this one, he was all of those, and a survivor of things he could never explain. Each story, he thought, is built of the secrets we bury and the truths we can't escape. And with each new dawn over rusted steel, the city, like Marcus, chose, one more time, to try again. Story 5. Let's explore our fifth story. And it opens with a port worker who discovered that his shipping manifest had names that didn't match the cargo. In the neon-washed corridors of Miami's port district, where the salt air mixed with diesel fumes and the distant pulse of cargo cranes never ceased, the summer of 2026 pressed down like a fever dream. The city breathed differently here, in the spaces between legitimate commerce and the shadow economy that moved through shipping containers like blood through arteries. Diego walked these docks with the careful precision of a man who had learned to see patterns in chaos, to read the subtle signs that separated routine cargo from something more dangerous. At 42, his hands bore the calluses of honest labor, and his eyes carried the weight of choices made in the gray spaces between survival and complicity. The morning had begun like any other, with the pre-dawn ritual of coffee and silence in the small apartment he shared with his sister Carmen, who worked double shifts as a medical technician and while studying for her nursing boards. Their mother's medical bills had consumed their father's pension, leaving them with debts that legitimate work could service but never eliminate. The mathematics of survival in Miami required supplemental income, the kind that didn't appear on tax forms but arrived in cash envelopes passed between careful hands in the parking lots of all-night diners. Carmen never asked where the extra money came from when the lights stayed on and her textbooks were paid for on time. She focused on her studies with the determined optimism of someone who believed education could lift them above the circumstances that had trapped their parents in cycles of debt and diminished expectations. Diego protected her faith by keeping his own compromises hidden, maintaining the fiction that over time pay and weekend work explained their improved financial stability. The shipping manifest that changed everything arrived on a Tuesday morning thick with humidity and the promise of afternoon thunderstorms. Diego was conducting routine inventory in Warehouse 47, checking container numbers against documentation, when he noticed the discrepancy. The manifest listed agricultural equipment bound for Guatemala, but the weight distribution seemed wrong. The cargo too light for industrial machinery, too heavy for simple farm tools. His experience moving legitimate cargo had taught him to recognize when something didn't match its paperwork. The container in question sat among dozens of others in the vast storage facility, unmarked except for a series of numbers that corresponded to a shipping company Diego had never heard of, despite 15 years working the docks. The lock was standard issue, but the security seals showed signs of recent replacement, subtle evidence that someone had accessed the contents after official inspection. Diego's instincts, honed by years of avoiding trouble while recognizing opportunity, told him this container held something worth investigating. Miguel, his contact in the informal network that supplemented port workers' legitimate income, had mentioned increased security around certain shipments, federal agents asking questions about documentation irregularities, customs officials working overtime shifts that suggested heightened scrutiny of specific cargo routes. The conversation had been casual, the kind of workplace gossip that helped workers navigate the complex politics of port employment. But Diego recognized the warning embedded in Miguel's casual observations. That evening, as storm clouds gathered over Biscayne Bay and the air grew thick with the promise of rain, Diego returned to the warehouse with bolt cutters borrowed from the maintenance shed. The container opened with a metallic shriek that seemed to echo through the cavernous space, revealing wooden crates packed with military-grade weapons hidden beneath layers of agricultural machinery. Assault rifles, automatic weapons, ammunition. enough firepower to supply a small army, all disguised as farming equipment bound for Central American markets. Diego's hands trembled as he closed the container, his mind racing through the implications of what he had discovered. This wasn't simple smuggling or tax avoidance, the kind of gray market activity that helped port workers supplement their incomes without seriously challenging the system. This was arms trafficking on an international scale, the kind of operation that drew federal attention and carried sentences measured in decades rather than years. But the discovery also represented opportunity, the kind of payday that could eliminate his family's medical debts, fund Carmen's education through graduation, maybe even allow them to move away from Miami to somewhere their past couldn't follow. Diego understood that knowledge was currency in the shadow economy, that information about high-value cargo could be sold to competing networks willing to pay premium prices for actionable intelligence. The next morning brought rain and Miguel's phone call, his voice carrying the careful neutrality of a man delivering dangerous news. Federal agents had been asking questions about Diego specifically, showing photographs taken by security cameras, requesting employment records and shift schedules. Someone had noticed his after-hours access to the warehouse, his deviation from normal routines. The net was closing with the methodical precision of a system designed to catch men like him. Diego met Miguel at a seafood restaurant near the port, the kind of place where conversations could be hidden beneath the noise of television sports broadcasts and the casual chatter of workers ending their shifts. Over coffee that tasted of stress and cigarettes they no longer smoked, Miguel explained the situation with the economy of words that characterized men who understood surveillance and its implications. The arms shipment belonged to a network that moved weapons from American manufacturers to Central American buyers, using legitimate shipping companies as cover for transactions that violated multiple federal statutes. Diego's discovery had triggered security protocols designed to identify potential leaks, his curiosity marking him as either an asset to be recruited or a threat to be eliminated. Neither option offered safety. Carmen noticed his distraction that evening as she studied at the kitchen table. Medical terminology scattered across textbooks that represented her future and their family's hope for economic mobility. Her questions about his mood carried the weight of someone who had learned to read the subtle signs of trouble, who understood that their improved circumstances existed on foundations that might not be stable. Diego deflected her concerns with reassurances that felt hollow even as he spoke them. The decision came at 3 a.m, as he lay awake calculating odds and consequences while listening to the distant sound of container ships moving through shipping channels. He could report what he had discovered to federal authorities, trading cooperation for protection and the possibility of witness relocation. He could attempt to sell the information to competing criminal networks, risking retaliation from the organization he was betraying. Or he could simply disappear, abandoning the life he had built in Miami for the uncertain safety of anonymity somewhere else. Morning brought clarity and resignation. Diego drove to the federal building in downtown Miami, the weight of his decision settling on his shoulders like humidity that never lifted. Agent Patricia Rodriguez listened to his story with the professional attention of someone who had heard similar confessions before, who understood the mathematics of desperation that drove ordinary people to make extraordinary choices. The investigation that followed consumed months of Diego's life, transforming him from port worker to cooperating witness to protected asset in a case that eventually encompassed multiple federal agencies and international law enforcement organizations. The arms trafficking network unraveled with the systematic precision of a carefully planned operation. Arrests spanning 3 countries and resulting in the seizure of weapons worth millions of dollars. Diego's testimony proved crucial in securing convictions, his detailed knowledge of port operations and shipping procedures providing evidence that prosecutors used to demonstrate the scope and sophistication of the criminal organization. But cooperation came with costs that extended beyond the obvious risks of retaliation from the networks he had betrayed. Carmen struggled with the revelation that her education had been partially funded by money connected to international arms trafficking, that the stability she had taken for granted existed because her brother had compromised his principles in ways she was still learning to understand. Their relationship, once characterized by mutual support and shared goals, became complicated by questions of complicity and moral responsibility that had no easy answers. The trial proceeded with the mechanical efficiency of a system designed to process guilt into punishment. Defense attorneys arguing circumstances and character, while prosecutors presented evidence of systematic criminal enterprise. Diego watched from the witness stand as his words helped secure convictions that would send men to federal prison for decades. Understanding that justice was a complex equation that rarely balanced perfectly. Sentencing brought a kind of closure, though not the satisfaction Diego had expected. The judge acknowledged his cooperation while noting that his initial involvement, however limited, had contributed to the perpetuation of violence in regions already devastated by conflict. The moral mathematics remained complicated, resistance to easy calculation or comfortable resolution. Witness protection relocated Diego and Carmen to a small city in the Pacific Northwest, where he found employment in a shipping facility that moved legitimate cargo under skies that were gray instead of brilliant blue. Carmen completed her nursing degree and began working in a trauma center, her skills helping to repair damage caused by violence, while her experiences informed her understanding of the complex factors that drove people to make compromising choices. The new life was safer but smaller, constrained by the requirements of anonymity and the constant awareness that their security depended on maintaining distance from the relationships and locations that had defined their identity. Diego learned to appreciate the quiet satisfaction of honest work, while understanding that his past would always cast shadows on any future he might build. On quiet evenings in their modest apartment, surrounded by the sounds of a city that had accepted them without knowing their history, Diego and Carmen would sometimes discuss the choices that had brought them to this place. The conversations were careful, conducted in the coded language of people who had learned that certain truths were too dangerous to speak directly, but they carried the weight of shared understanding and mutual forgiveness. Miami continued its restless breathing in their absence. New workers taking their places on the docks. New shipments moving through warehouses where different secrets waited to be discovered by different men facing similar choices between survival and principle. The port district remained a place where legitimate commerce and shadow economy intersected, where federal agents and criminal networks conducted their eternal dance of pursuit and evasion. The ocean that had once defined Diego's daily rhythm now existed only in memory, its salt air replaced by mountain breezes that carried different promises and different threats. But the lessons learned in those neon-washed corridors remained: that survival often required compromise, that safety was always temporary, and that the line between victim and participant was frequently thinner than the distance between one choice and another. In the growing darkness of another Pacific Northwest evening, surrounded by the quiet sounds of a city learning to trust them with its secrets, Diego understood that redemption was not a destination, but a process, measured not in the magnitude of past mistakes, but in the daily commitment to making choices that honored the possibility of becoming better than circumstances had required them to be. Story 6. Let's examine our sixth story. And it opens with a trucker who discovered that his manifest didn't match what the Border Patrol dogs were alerting to. In the endless highways of Arizona, where the desert sun bleaches secrets into sand, and the asphalt shimmers like liquid mercury under the weight of summer, Jake Reeves drove his 18-wheeler with the methodical precision of a man who had learned to navigate both foreign battlefields and domestic highways. The year was 2024, and the stretch of Interstate 10 between Phoenix and the California border had become his corridor of survival. A ribbon of concrete that connected legitimate freight runs with the shadow economy that flowed like underground rivers beneath the American Southwest. Jake was 37, his hands bearing the calluses of honest labor and the tremor of choices made in the spaces between desperation and opportunity. His Peterbilt cab smelled of coffee, diesel, and the lingering scent of sage that drifted through the vents when the desert wind shifted. Behind him, secured under tarps and legitimate cargo manifests, rode crates that contained more than agricultural equipment bound for Los Angeles distribution centers. The weight distribution felt wrong to anyone who understood trucks. Too heavy for farm machinery, too light for construction equipment, but perfectly balanced for the kind of merchandise that moved through desert routes under the protection of carefully cultivated relationships with border security personnel who had learned to see only what their paychecks required. His sister Maria worked double shifts at the Phoenix Veterans Hospital, her nursing degree earned through night school while Jake sent money home from his military deployment in Afghanistan. Their father's pancreatic cancer had consumed the family's modest savings, leaving them with medical debts that legitimate trucking wages could service but never eliminate. The mathematics of survival in post-recession America required supplemental income, the kind that arrived in cash payments made in truck stop parking lots, where conversations were brief and documentation non-existent. The morning run had started like dozens before it, with pre-dawn checks at a warehouse outside Tucson where legitimate agricultural equipment was loaded alongside crates marked with codes that corresponded to nothing in official inventories. Jake's military experience made him valuable to the operation. He understood weapons systems, could spot quality from inferior products, and possessed the driving skills necessary to navigate checkpoint procedures without attracting attention. His clean military record and legitimate CDL provided cover that less experienced drivers couldn't offer. Miguel, his primary contact in the network, was a former Marine who had served 2 tours in Iraq before returning to Arizona to find that his combat experience translated poorly into civilian employment opportunities. The smuggling operation offered better money than security guard work or construction labor, enough to support families while maintaining the fiction of legitimate business activity. Miguel's instructions were always precise. Routes to avoid, timing for optimal checkpoint rotations, radio frequencies for coordinated communication with other drivers carrying similar cargo. The weapons moved from manufacturers in Arizona and Nevada through straw purchasers who exploited gaps in federal oversight, then south through border crossings controlled by networks that measured loyalty in cash payments and maintained discipline through methods that Jake preferred not to contemplate. The profit margins were substantial enough to justify the risks. Though Jake understood that each successful run created dependency on the next, that the system was designed to trap participants rather than reward them with genuine economic mobility. But this morning felt different. Jake's radio crackled with unusual chatter, coded warnings about increased enforcement presence along his normal route, references to federal task force operations that suggested the comfortable corruption of routine border security had been disrupted by outside attention. The dogs at the primary checkpoint were more aggressive, their handlers more thorough, the inspection protocols more rigorous than the perfunctory examinations that typically characterized Jake's runs. Agent Patricia Morales had been monitoring the corridor for months, her task force combining DEA resources with ATF expertise to map the weapons trafficking networks that used legitimate freight movements as cover. Her surveillance had identified patterns in shipping manifests, correlations between driver schedules and enforcement shift rotations, financial irregularities that suggested systematic corruption within border security operations. The investigation had reached the point where arrests were imminent. though the timing depended on catching major shipments with sufficient evidence to secure convictions that would dismantle the network rather than simply removing individual participants. Jake's truck approached the secondary checkpoint with the steady rhythm of routine. His paperwork prepared, his manner calm, his responses to standard questions rehearsed through dozens of previous encounters. But the German Shepherd that circled his trailer showed unusual interest in the rear cargo section, its behavior alerting handlers to chemical signatures that indicated the presence of materials not listed on official manifests. The dog's persistence forced a more thorough inspection than Jake's bribes had been designed to prevent. Agent Morales watched from an unmarked surveillance vehicle as the inspection team discovered the hidden compartments. Her years of investigation culminating in the arrest of a driver whose cooperation could provide evidence necessary to prosecute the network's leadership. Jake's military record and family obligations made him a potentially valuable witness, someone whose testimony could carry credibility with juries, while his personal circumstances provided motivation for cooperation. The arrest proceeded with the mechanical efficiency of a system designed to process guilt into leverage. Handcuffs applied with professional courtesy, while Miranda rights were recited against the backdrop of desert highway and distant mountain ranges. Jake's truck was impounded as evidence, his legitimate cargo delayed indefinitely, his CDL suspended pending resolution of federal charges that carried sentences measured in decades rather than years. Maria learned about her brother's arrest through a phone call from the detention facility. Her shift at the hospital interrupted by news that transformed their family's financial stability into legal crisis. The money Jake had been sending home was revealed as proceeds from weapons trafficking, income that had funded their father's medical treatments and Maria's continuing education while connecting them to criminal networks they had never fully understood. The prosecution offered Jake a choice between cooperation and incarceration. His military service and family obligations weighed against the seriousness of charges related to interstate weapons trafficking. Agent Morales explained the investigation's scope, the evidence collected through months of surveillance, the likelihood of conviction based on physical evidence and documented communications between network participants. Jake's decision to cooperate provided prosecutors with detailed knowledge of smuggling routes, corruption networks, and operational procedures that led to arrests spanning multiple states and federal agencies. His testimony proved crucial in securing convictions, though cooperation came with costs that extended beyond obvious risks of retaliation from criminal organizations he had betrayed. The trial proceeded with careful attention to security protocols, witness protection measures designed to shield Jake's identity, while allowing his testimony to demonstrate the network's scope and sophistication. Defense attorneys argued entrapment and economic desperation, but the evidence of systematic weapons trafficking overwhelmed arguments about individual circumstances and financial pressure. Maria struggled with revelations about the source of money that had supported their family, her medical training creating ethical conflicts about accepting proceeds from activities that contributed to violence in communities already devastated by crime and poverty. Their relationship became complicated by questions of complicity and moral responsibility that had no easy answers. Sentencing reflected Jake's cooperation while acknowledging the seriousness of charges related to interstate weapons trafficking. Judge Rebecca Martinez spoke about the societal damage caused by illegal weapons distribution, the communities affected by violence, enabled by networks like the one Jake had participated in, the necessity of consequences that reflected both individual choices and systematic problems. Jake was relocated through witness protection to a small city in the Pacific Northwest, where he found employment driving local delivery routes under skies that remained gray instead of brilliant blue. Maria completed her nursing degree and began working in a trauma center, her skills helping to repair damage caused by violence, while her experiences informed her understanding of the complex factors that drove people to make compromising choices. The new life was safer but smaller, constrained by security requirements and the constant awareness that their protection depended on maintaining distance from relationships and locations that had defined their identity. Jake learned to appreciate the quiet satisfaction of honest work, while understanding that his past would always influence any future he might build. On quiet evenings in their modest apartment, surrounded by the sounds of a city that had accepted them without knowing their history, Jake and Maria would sometimes discuss the choices that had brought them to this place. The conversations were careful, conducted in the coded language of people who had learned that certain truths were too dangerous to speak directly, but they carried the weight of shared understanding and mutual forgiveness. Arizona continued its restless breathing in their absence. New drivers taking Jake's routes, new cargo moving through warehouses where different secrets waited to be discovered by different men, facing similar choices between survival and principle. The desert highways remained corridors where legitimate commerce and shadow economy intersected, where federal agents and criminal networks conducted their eternal dance of pursuit and evasion. The Southwest that had once defined Jake's daily rhythm now existed only in memory, its endless horizons replaced by mountain ranges that carried different promises and different threats. But the lessons learned on those desert highways remained. That survival often required compromise, that safety was always temporary, and that the line between victim and participant was frequently thinner than the distance between one choice and another. In the growing darkness of another Pacific Northwest evening, surrounded by the quiet sounds of a city learning to trust them with its secrets, Jake understood that redemption was not a destination, but a process, measured not in the magnitude of past mistakes, but in the daily commitment to making choices that honored the possibility of becoming better than circumstances had required them to be. Story 7. Let's examine our seventh story. And it opens with an engineer who discovered that his company's safety reports didn't match what he was seeing in the field. In 2024, Houston's skyline burned under the weight of money flowing like crude through unseen pipelines beneath the polished glass towers of energy giants. And beneath that corporate promise, men like Christian learned to move in the blind spots of the oil industry. Between the hum of Tesla Model S sedans idling outside River Oaks charity galas and the quiet chime of notification alerts on phones he could no longer afford to ignore. The refineries breathed like sleeping giants along the ship channel, their flare stacks burning against the humid sky, while beneath the surface, in boardrooms and back-office deals, different kinds of fires were being lit. Christian was 34, his hands bearing the calluses of fieldwork and the tremor of choices made in the gray spaces between professional ethics and family survival. His apartment in Montrose sat between a coffee shop where tech workers debated startup valuations and a clinic where uninsured families waited hours for basic care. The contrast reminded him daily that Houston's oil wealth flowed like an underground river, enriching some while leaving others to survive on the margins of prosperity that never quite reached their neighborhoods. The morning had started with another notification from his banking app. Overdraft fees compounding like interest on a loan he couldn't service. His father's chemotherapy bills consuming his petroleum engineering salary faster than crude prices could recover from their 2020 collapse. Christian's degree from University of Houston had once promised middle-class stability, but layoffs during the pandemic had left him accepting contract work that paid less and offered no benefits, while his father's stage 4 pancreatic cancer demanded treatments that cost more per month than Christian earned in 2. Ellie, his sister, managed the family's medical appointments while studying for her MCAT. Her dreams of medical school postponed indefinitely, while she coordinated oncology schedules and insurance appeals. She never asked where the money came from when the bills were paid on time, when her textbooks appeared without explanation, when their father's experimental treatments were approved despite insurance rejections. Christian protected her faith in the system, by keeping his own compromises hidden behind the fiction that over time, pay and consulting fees explained their improved financial stability. The safety report that changed everything arrived on a Thursday morning thick with Gulf Coast humidity and the promise of afternoon thunderstorms. Christian was conducting routine pipeline inspections for Petroleum Energy, checking pressure readings against documentation, when he noticed the discrepancy. The corporate environmental compliance reports listed minimal emissions and optimal safety margins, but the field data showed readings that exceeded federal limits by margins that could trigger EPA investigations and criminal liability for corporate executives. The pipeline in question carried crude from East Texas fields through residential neighborhoods in Galena Park, where families with children played in yards that bordered easements containing infrastructure that leaked hydrogen sulfide and benzene into groundwater systems. Christian's experience with legitimate pipeline safety had taught him to recognize when environmental data was manipulated to avoid regulatory scrutiny and expensive remediation requirements. Dr. Nora, an environmental scientist monitoring air quality for the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, had been tracking anomalous pollution readings in the same corridor where Christian worked. Her research indicated systematic underreporting of toxic emissions, patterns that suggested corporate decisions to prioritize profit margins over public health in communities that lacked political representation to challenge industrial environmental damage. That evening, as storm clouds gathered over the Houston metropolitan area, and the air grew thick with the promise of rain that would temporarily wash petrochemical residue from streets and playgrounds, Christian returned to his apartment with data files copied from Petromex's internal monitoring systems. The information revealed a network of falsified reports, bribed inspectors, and environmental consultants who provided misleading assessments that allowed continued operation of facilities that exceeded safety parameters. Christian understood that knowledge of corporate environmental crimes was currency in Houston's shadow economy, that information about regulatory violations could be sold to competing energy companies, environmental activist organizations, or federal agencies seeking evidence for prosecution of systematic pollution crimes, the kind of payday that could eliminate his family's medical debts, fund Ellie's medical school education, maybe even allow them to move away from neighborhoods where air quality was compromised by the same industrial processes that provided Houston's economic foundation. But the discovery also represented danger. Petroleum Energy employed security consultants who monitored employee communications, tracked access to sensitive environmental data, and maintained relationships with law enforcement officials who understood that Houston's economic prosperity depended on maintaining the fiction that oil production could be conducted safely in urban environments. Whistleblowers who threatened corporate profits had historically faced career destruction, legal retaliation, and occasionally more direct forms of intimidation. The decision came at 3 a.m. as Christian lay awake calculating medical bills and Ellie's education costs while listening to the distant sound of refinery operations that never ceased. He could report what he had discovered to environmental regulators, trading cooperation for protection and possible financial rewards through whistleblower statutes. He could attempt to sell the information to environmental litigation firms seeking evidence for class action lawsuits against energy companies. Or he could simply keep the data as insurance while continuing to collect paychecks from Petroleum until the situation resolved itself. Morning brought clarity and moral complexity. Christian drove to the office of Environmental Protection Solutions, a consulting firm that specialized in regulatory compliance for energy companies, but also maintained relationships with federal enforcement agencies. Attorney Axel listened to Christian's story with the professional attention of someone who had navigated similar cases involving corporate environmental crimes and individual employees caught between economic necessity and ethical obligations. The investigation that followed consumed months of Christian's life. transforming him from petroleum engineer to protected witness in a case that eventually encompassed multiple federal agencies and international environmental monitoring organizations. The Environmental Crimes Network unraveled with systematic precision, revealing patterns of pollution, data falsification, and regulatory capture that extended throughout Houston's energy sector. Christian's testimony proved crucial in securing convictions against Petromax executives, his technical knowledge of pipeline operations providing evidence that prosecutors used to demonstrate systematic violations of federal environmental statutes. But cooperation came with costs that extended beyond obvious risks of industry retaliation and career consequences. Ellie struggled with revelations about the source of money that had funded their father's medical treatments, her pre-medical studies creating ethical conflicts about accepting proceeds from activities that had contributed to environmental damage in communities already disproportionately affected by industrial pollution. Their relationship became complicated by questions about complicity and moral responsibility in systems that prioritized profit over public health. The trial proceeded with careful attention to corporate defense strategies that sought to minimize individual responsibility, while portraying systematic environmental violations as unfortunate mistakes rather than deliberate criminal enterprises. Christian watched from the witness stand as his testimony helped secure convictions that would send energy executives to federal prison, while environmental remediation requirements would cost Petromax hundreds of millions in cleanup expenses. Dr. Nora's research provided scientific evidence that corroborated Christian's engineering data, her environmental monitoring studies demonstrating measurable health impacts in communities exposed to illegal pollution levels. Together, their evidence created a comprehensive case for prosecution that energy company attorneys could not dismiss as regulatory overreach or environmental activism. Sentencing reflected the severity of environmental crimes while acknowledging the systematic nature of corporate pollution in communities that lacked resources to protect themselves from industrial environmental damage. Judge Gianna spoke about intergenerational justice, the responsibility of energy companies to operate within legal parameters, and the necessity of individual accountability for corporate decisions that prioritized profits over public health. Christian was relocated through federal witness protection to a small city in Colorado, where he found employment with a renewable energy consulting firm that specialized in environmental remediation projects. The work paid modestly, but offered purpose beyond personal survival. Opportunities to help communities transition from fossil fuel dependency toward sustainable energy systems that prioritized environmental health over extraction profits. Ellie completed her medical degree and began working in environmental medicine, her research focusing on health impacts of industrial pollution in communities that had been systematically exposed to toxic emissions. Her work honored their father's memory, while contributing to medical literature that documented connections between corporate environmental crimes and public health outcomes. The new life was safer, but required constant vigilance. Federal protection depending on maintaining anonymity and avoiding contact with Houston's energy industry networks that might seek retaliation against witnesses whose testimony had disrupted profitable environmental crimes. Christian learned to appreciate the satisfaction of legitimate environmental work, while understanding that his past would always influence any future he might build. On quiet evenings in their Colorado apartment, surrounded by mountain views that reminded them of possibilities beyond Houston's petrochemical landscape, Christian and Ellie would sometimes discuss the choices that had brought them to this place. The conversations were careful, conducted with awareness that certain aspects of their experience required discretion, but they carried the weight of shared understanding about the costs and benefits of challenging systematic corporate environmental crimes. Meanwhile, Aaron and Theo, two former Petromax security consultants who had been investigating employee communications, found themselves unemployed after the company's conviction led to systematic restructuring that eliminated positions associated with corporate surveillance and intimidation practices. Their knowledge of internal security protocols had made them valuable to the criminal network, but also made them liabilities once federal investigation began examining company practices. Houston continued its complex relationship with energy production and environmental consequences. New regulations resulting from Christian's case creating improved oversight, while economic pressures maintained incentives for companies to prioritize profits over environmental compliance. The energy sector remained a place where federal agencies and corporate legal teams conducted ongoing negotiations about acceptable levels of environmental damage in communities that bore the costs of industrial prosperity. The Gulf Coast that had once defined Christian's professional identity now existed in memory and media reports about ongoing environmental litigation. Its refineries and pipelines replaced in his daily experience by solar installations and wind farms that generated energy without the toxic legacy of fossil fuel extraction. But the lessons learned in Houston's energy corridors remained relevant. That environmental protection required individual courage as well as systematic reform. That corporate accountability depended on employees willing to risk career security for public health, and that environmental justice was achieved through persistent advocacy rather than regulatory assumptions. In the growing darkness of another Colorado evening, surrounded by clean air and the quiet sounds of a community built around environmental sustainability rather than extraction industry profits, Christian understood that redemption was measured not only in personal safety, but in contributions to environmental protection that honored the communities whose health had been compromised by the corporate crimes he had helped expose. Thanks for joining Crime Ciphers as we explored the shadows behind Houston's oil empire. If this story gripped you, make sure to like, subscribe, and press the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into true crime. Share your thoughts below. Your voice fuels our investigations. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.